Well, thank you very much. I want to thank Congresswoman Edwards and Congressman Pitts for being here. I want to thank all of you for your testimony and being responsive to the questions. This has been very, very informative. You know, I began by talking about the need for our U.S. government officials to be more out in the field, to listen, to learn more, to be have more of a connection to the indigenous communities. I would just add, I think that's the same for members of Congress who travel routinely to the number of the countries that we've talked about here today, but who oftentimes overlook the indigenous questions regarding indigenous communities, or, you know, I mean, they could actually meet with some of the representatives of the indigenous communities. I think that would be a signal, one, that we care, two, to the government in which these communities exist, that, you know, it's important. You know, and again, I mean, I think, you know, part of what we're supposed to be about is advocating for human rights, and at every level. And clearly, the indigenous communities, not just in Asia but around the world, have taken the brunt of discrimination and hardship. Let me just, before I close, ask any of you if you have any closing words of wisdom that you'd like to leave with us. I'll yield the floor to you if you have anything you want to add.
Mr. Chairman, I forgot. I had a question for Ms. Richardson, forgot to ask it. In some areas, I think you said some countries, like the Philippines, they have passed laws to protect the indigenous communities. What kind of laws should a country pass to protect the rights of the indigenous people?
Well, as a starting point, governments can look to the ILO Convention and to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as the sort of baseline documents that point to the kinds of rights abuses that these communities suffer, and the legislation that would flow from that is fairly obvious. The Philippines, I believe, was actually the first country in Asia to pass this kind of legislation, and it addressed there primarily collective land rights, titling, access to education and other kinds of government services like health care, schooling, particular kinds of, I believe it's the Philippines law that actually has some interesting language about respecting traditional models of and providing for traditional models of health care as opposed to sort of standard forms or what the majority expects in terms of health care. But I think the basics really have to do with recognition, with land rights, and with, I think, very strong and clear protections against discrimination. I mean, the kinds of discrimination these communities face is so pervasive that you can imagine legislation that went on and on and on to build in provisions to prevent against it. But also, I think, particular stipulations with respect to free, prior, and full consent about development projects, be they private or public ones, I think is also, it's such a common problem across the region that I think legislation should particularly focus on that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr.
And legislation is just one part of it, because there's some great laws in the books, you know, all over the world, but no one seems to want to implement them or follow them. I mean, I don't know how many countries are signed on to the International Declaration of Human Rights who routinely kind of disregarded, and so it's the laws and it's the political will to implement those laws. Ms. Eka, you wanted to add something?
I just wanted to add to that. In India, we are recognized as tribal people, not as indigenous people, and you know they both have different implications. And yes, as Sophie was saying, if we were identified and recognized as indigenous people, I don't think we would be facing the same kinds of trouble with our land and water rights.
So, Ms. Richardson?
Yeah, just to put things on the to-do list. I mean, look, one thing that Congress can do and does better than just about anybody else is, you know, call U.S. companies up and ask them to talk about their activities in some of these regions and ask them to describe in detail how they have ensured in their business practices that they are respecting the rights of indigenous communities, and indeed how they're working with the governments of those countries to make sure that happens. And certainly, you know, reaching out to these communities yourselves, but also making it clear, not just to the State Department, but to the Pentagon and other agencies, that reaching out to those communities is very important. I mean, I've spoken to people at the Pentagon about Papua a lot, and I'm a little bit taken aback at how little contact some of the people who've worked there on Indonesia for years have ever had with these communities. It's extraordinary. So I think stipulating or encouraging them to do that would be really helpful.
And what might be helpful to us, too, is if there are particular companies and corporations that you think need a little reminding that they need to be a little bit more sensitive, that would be very helpful.
I'd be delighted to see
or if there are companies that are models that are doing the right thing, that would be helpful as well. Sure. Any final closing statements by any? Mr. Sering?
I would like to add, a few more words. Gilgit Baltistan is situated in an area where the three greatest mountain ranges of Karakoram, Himalaya, and the Hindu Kush, they converge. And the Karakoram is the youngest mountain range, as they call it, in the world today. And there's a lot of seismic activity in the region. In 2005, for instance, there was an earthquake that killed more than 100,000 Pakistanis. And the seismic epicenter was very close to, actually on border of Gilgit Baltistan. So all these activities that are happening, like mining and dam building by China and Pakistan, is very catastrophic, not only for the local people, I mean, displacing them and marginalizing them, disenfranchising them, but also going to create problems, environmental as well as economic and strategic at global levels. So, I mean, I'm really grateful, and once again, I request the U.S. Congress to look into the matter, and hopefully, Gilgit Baltistan would be one of the regions under the radar. Well,
thank you very much. I want to thank all of you, and again, I would encourage you to stay in touch with the Commission if there is follow-up work that you think we should do. And again, I reiterate what I said at the beginning. I think it's important for our government, not only at the executive level, but at the congressional level, to reach out to some of these communities when we're traveling to various places around the world. Sometimes we don't because we're just not aware. You're helping to make us aware, and if there are some concrete suggestions of places that people need to go or people need to talk to when they travel to various countries, please let us know that as well. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.